Agriculture and nutrition. No farmers, no food.
No food, no need for nutrition experts.
While that might be an oversimplification, we know that the experts in nutrition, RDNs, are hungry for connection with those who grow food. Hi, I'm Michele Payne, and we are working to bring you voices from around the food plate.
And I'm Nicole Rodriguez. We're here to arm the dietitian community with the real stories of agriculture, busting the biggest misconceptions to overcome food bullying, and above all else, empowering you to help others feel more confident in their food choices.
Today, I am excited to welcome another dairy farmer, even if he has the wrong colored cows. We will get to that later. Derrick Josi is joining us from the West Coast. So we have pretty much the center of the country, the East Coast, and the West Coast represented. And Derrick, if you do not know, he is TDF Honest Farming on most of social, and he has a large following. He takes a very interesting position in dealing with the antagonists. We will get with that in a bit. But more importantly, Derrick is a dad. He is a dairy farmer in an absolutely gorgeous area of Oregon. And we've had him on the Food Bullying podcast before, but we really wanted to ask him back, talk a little bit about his new setup and what's been happening over the last couple of years. Derrick recently moved all of his cows into a rotary parlor. And for those of you who work with dairy cattle, you know that they are creatures of habit and they do not like change. So I'm sure, Derrick, you have many interesting stories. Welcome to the podcast. We are excited to have you, as well as your daughter there in the background.
And I have my Australian Shepherd under the desk with me too, because, well, it's a family affair. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back.
The gang's all here, right? We have to have a shepherd in the mix too. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So, Derrick, you are self-described as a guy who survives on sarcasm and coffee while dispelling BS on social media because you don't put up with or ignore idiots online. Because if we're going to do that, then they're just feeling justified to stay ignorant. And I love to hear about that approach. I think in the animal agriculture space, you probably face it more than anybody. So if we can kind of touch on this social media piece a bit before we go any further. Were you always sort of a myth buster? Have you found that certain techniques work better than others when trying to get out your messaging? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And everyone, if you're not already following TDF Honest Farming, especially on Instagram, you're very active and you're at like a 70,000 follower count.
Yeah, I'm even more active on Facebook. I'm just this close to being 1 million followers. I've got 80,000 to go. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I've always been, I don't know if it's just the family I grew up in. My grandpa used to just, whatever my opinion was or anybody's opinion was, he'd take the exact opposite so that we would have to be able to voice our opinions in a way that we could argue from our point of view. And he was really good at just riling us up and frustrating us. And so from a young age, I've been combating people that just try and get you riled up. So I don't get phased. Dylan in the background. I don't get phased by a lot, but my daughter bending over in the background, yeah, that's Dylan. This is a PG show.
So essentially, you were trained for debate from a young age. So maybe when you decide to retire from your current career, maybe go into law. A lot of possibilities for you, it would seem.
I thought about going into law when I was exploring what I wanted to do for a living, but I went off to college and I realized that college is just not something I wanted to spend 8 years or 6 years doing to get a law degree. I just no, thank you. Hi.
Yeah. And I'm sure the dairy community is glad that they have you and you didn't ship yourself off to law school after all. Tell me, what are the biggest misconceptions that you hear and you have to bust surrounding dairy? And how should people like me in the field of dietetics sort of help you out in dispelling those myths?
Oh, the biggest ones would obviously have to do with the environment, how much water it takes to produce either whether it's a pound of hamburger or a gallon of milk. And they use statistics in a shady way. Shocking, I know that somebody would use statistics to push a lie. By talking about all the water usage without acknowledging that the vast majority, over 90% of it, is rainwater used to grow crops that are fed to cattle. Or in the case of a beef cow that's out on the range, they count all that water that's falling from the sky as part of what goes into making a beef patty. So that would be an obvious one. There's always the myth that there's pus in milk, and they conflate somatic cell count with pus, which is ridiculous. Or the fact that milk is not nutritious, and you're better off eating a plant-based diet. Bye, Dylan. Love you. My wife just grabbed Dylan, so we won't have her running around in the back room anymore.
Okay. She's always welcome, though.
Yeah, but she was swinging a thing around, and I thought she was going to bonk me in the head. So, anyway, so yeah, general myths and misconceptions, and then there's always the animal welfare side. Uh, Speaking of the rotary, I just had to do a video explaining that if you don't actually watch the video of the rotary and you just take a look at the screen grab that Facebook or Instagram shows, I have people that comment about how horrible it is that they stay in that stall 24 hours a day being milked. When you just click on the video, it proves that comment wrong, and you just look like one of these smart, with quotation marks, people on the internet voicing opinions that have no factual basis. So things like that.
Derek, I
Can
think
we talk about that rotary a little bit? Because I know you both are all in dairy. That's a term. I know what it is, but a term, if it's unfamiliar to me, probably unfamiliar to a lot of our audience. So maybe we could talk
Yeah,
about what that actually is.
absolutely. So, general term in dairy is rotary, but for those of you that are not in agriculture and not in dairy, think of it as a merry-go-round. You see them at the fair, you jump on, you go around, you jump off. The cows literally fight to get on it. We put the milk machine on them. Our rotary, they're on the rotary for one turn. It takes 9 minutes. They're done being milked at about the 7 to 8 minute mark, and then they're just finishing out the rotary ride. They back off and they go back out into the barns and just continue just being a normal dairy cow. It's From what I see, it's the highlight of their day. Twice a day, they are sprinting through the holding pen to get up there. They fight to get on. They don't like to back off. We have a barrel hanging there that's supposed to make them back off. And now all they do is play with the barrel. So we've had to put a mat further back next to their shoulder, which with cattle, if they see something by their shoulder, they are going to back up. General animal behavior, which is getting the job done. Eventually, they'll probably just ignore that too, and they'll try and go for a second ride.
wait, I have to make a point here. If they weren't jerseys, Derek, they would not be having this issue because for those of you who don't know, jerseys are the troublemaker of the dairy breeds. Would you concur
You
with
mean the
that?
smart? You mean the
No, no.
smart cows of the dairy
They're
breed?
ordinary little things that like to cause trouble.
Yeah, they are. I guess I have to admit they have like little man syndrome. That's it's a horrible concept, I know, but we've all seen the little guy that puffs up his chest and has to act. Jerseys have a little bit of that syndrome. They feel that they're smaller nature. They have to have more attitude. Is
Yeah,
how I would describe it.
they have huge attitude, but for our listeners and viewers, there's 6 different dairy breeds, and jerseys are actually known for the highest protein and the
And
highest fat.
butterfats. Yep.
Yes, and so their milk is used in a lot of cheeses and different products. Is your
Ice
ship for
cream.
fluid, or where do you
Mm,
see your milk go?
we we go to Tillamook because we're one of the member owners, and
Right.
so it's in cheeses and ice creams and sour cream and butter and all the delicious dairy products that everybody loves.
And just so
Mm-mm-mm.
you know, I always get Tillamook when I have that chance. Their distribution's much better in the Midwest, by the way, now
Yep,
than what it
and
used to
it'll
be.
continue to get better.
Well, good. I'm glad. But Holsteins will always remain superior. I just have to get that in. And for people who wonder why we're going back and forth, this is just the thing that Derek and I do because I love black and white dairy cattle and little brown cows drive me nuts. So
Well, there's always going to be a need for skim milk, so.
Oh, wow. This is getting a little bit fiery. Let me cool this down for a moment, literally. So what's your favorite flavor of Tillamook ice cream? Each of you. Derek, you go first.
Oh, that's such a trick question. So the Mary Berry pie is probably my favorite berry flavor. It's got the little chunks
Okay.
of pie crust in it. It is phenomenal. My go-to will always be chocolate peanut butter. When I was
oh,
playing sports in high school, uh, game day, I would eat a half gallon of chocolate peanut butter ice cream at lunch. Made me
half
power
a
through,
gallon?
Yeah.
Were you a
I
football
mean,
player?
yes, I was.
Oh.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but wrestling too. But they just came out with a Neapolitan ice cream,
Oh.
and I was blown away. It's delicious. It's got some fudge chunks mixed in on the chocolate side, and it is.
You're
But
making me
Mary
hungry.
Berry pie and chocolate peanut butter are probably my go-tos.
Michelle, do you have a favorite Tillamook ice cream
You know,
flavor?
I haven't lived on the West Coast forever, so I haven't bought ice cream per se, but I'd have to be talked out of chocolate peanut butter because a good chocolate peanut butter is. But I'll tell you what, as a runner and as raising a runner, we're not doing anything with ice cream on race day.
It's a different sport.
Different
Yeah.
sport, yeah.
But Derek, on an
Different
entirely
situation.
different note, what are some of the positive examples that you've seen from your work across social media? Do you see people engaging and gaining understanding of what it takes to milk cows and some of the different messages that you've been trying to get across, or is it pretty much just sarcasm and antagonism?
No, honestly, I'm human, so I focus on that 1% of comments that we all do when we go on the
Right.
internet. But 99% of the comments on there are positive. People just blown away at the technology that's in agriculture. Um, Happy to see how cows are treated. A lot of the times I have to explain, no, no, I'm not special. I'm not treating the dairy cattle special. This is what a normal dairy farmer does with their cattle. Because one of the things that it clicks with people is if a dairy cow is, or a cow in general is mistreated, they're or not fed right or not taken care of, the first thing that happens is their milk production goes down.
Yeah.
Do you know milk production is what pays my bills. So keeping a cow healthy, comfortable, well taken care of pays my bills. Cow comfort is a critical part of milking cows.
Yeah. It sure is. And it is for any dairy farmer, as you already echoed. But I'm curious, Derek, when you think about mental health and you think about what some of the questions and accusations, in particular, animal agriculture has faced, I know personally when I watch some of those videos, which isn't real often, I find it very insulting and it wears you down, right? So, from a mental health standpoint, do you feel like these constant questions, the barrage of accusations, has affected your mental health?
Oh, definitely. It definitely does, especially if you don't aren't self-aware, um, and you do just concentrate on the negative side of things. Uh, it's it's rough. I mean, anybody that's ever had the focus on social media on them knows that people, especially online, are just vicious. And so, I mean, I get comments on my weight. Yes, I do pack a couple extra pounds. That's my emergency reserve. There's been 3 times in my life when my appendix burst, couple other times when I got sick, where that extra weight came in handy because I was able to use it. So I keep a little extra weight on. It might also be the cream cheese danishes that do it, but who's gonna? I can't say no to those. Um, so being self-aware, so that when somebody does say, "Oh, yeah, look at you. You're the prime example of what a heart attack looks like." Well, thanks. No, I'm not. But yes, I could be a better. I could use the nutritionist that my cows use, so that maybe I'm getting the right nutrients and not getting as much sugar and fat as I may consume on a daily basis. But yeah, it can weigh on you. Um, it's rough. It's a dangerous place out there on the internet.
Well, and I don't think that many of the people that aren't farming understand how personally we take it. And I'll just leave it at that. I know Nicole
Hmm.
has a lot of dietetic questions, but the next time any of you hear someone accusing a farmer, if you maybe take a moment to encourage them to get the real perspective from somebody who's actually out there working cows or working the land, working with hogs, whatever it may be, farmers would sure appreciate it.
Yes, yes, they would.
And that's why we're here having conversations like these, and of course here directly for the dietetics community. And Derek, earlier you mentioned some misconceptions that you face all the time that might be pertinent to dietitians as well. You mentioned the environment among those things. And this big buzzword that I personally feel has been co opted by many different industries and perhaps misused is the word, what's that big S word? Sustainability,
Yeah.
right? And when we talk about sustainability, not everyone is looking at the different pillars of the economics, the social component, in addition to the environmental component. Everyone really kind of hones in on that environmental component. And I'm sure you kind of get the brunt of that
Hmm.
as a dairy farmer because there are so many misconceptions. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the commitments the dairy industry as a whole is making towards a more sustainable future and what that really means.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's 2030. We're planning on cutting our emissions to zero. Did I get that right?
I think so. I think so.
But and I love the goal, but I don't think we talk enough about how much we've already done on even just the greenhouse gas emissions per gallon of milk. I mean, 1940s there was 20 something million dairy cows, maybe a little more, and today there is just over 9 million cows and we're producing 4 times the amount of milk with less than a third of the cows. So right there alone we have made phenomenal strides on
Mhm.
sustainability. We are working much more closely with food manufacturers to bring those byproducts from, whether it's a mill making flour, bringing the byproducts of that into our farms and feeding it to our cows, which makes everything more sustainable. We're just farmers. We seem to get the the brunt of everything when we have been the leaders in sustainability forever. I'm fourth generation on this property. I want this property to be sustainable for the next 4 generations of Josies. It's this isn't something where I am just looking the next year or two. I'm looking for generations and centuries to come to make sure that this family farm will still be a viable option.
Mhm.
You touched on something that I get some pushback on sometimes, which is basically fewer cows, fewer inputs, but somehow we have more milk available to us. So, can you talk a little bit about how that came to
Yeah,
be?
absolutely. So if you look at a dairy cow from back in the 40s, they look a lot more like a beef cow.
Mhm.
We have been breeding dairy cattle for higher milk production and higher, in the case of Jerseys, not Holsteins, higher butter, fat, and protein.
Let's talk about milk production and who's predominantly stronger.
Well, yeah, like that goes back to skim milk. So we've got
Woo!
we've
Here we go again.
we've got dairy cattle that are at this point they are their own breed, or obviously their own breed, but they're so different than a beef cow, which is another misconception. Because if you look at a dairy cow, you think that cow is skinny. She must not be getting fed right when
Mhm.
compared to a beef cow. So we've got these cows that are have been bred for almost a century now, strictly for milk production. And so we have cows that are producing 4 or 5 times more milk than they were 100 years ago. So it takes less cows to produce more milk.
Yeah. It's a really interesting example, if I might add to that, Nicole. When you look at the genetics, and some people get freaked out about DNA and genes, but a really cool example is, as Derek said, how the cow's been bred. So their bone structure is literally a flatter, cleaner bone now than what it used to be, because beef cattle have rounder bones because they
Mm.
support, obviously, the mass that is required for beef. But I think it's important to note the secondary purpose of dairy cattle is beef cattle. I mean, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
much we love them, they're eventually
Right.
going to become food
Yep.
for us. But it's a great example, as Derek had said. The breeding has been fascinating to follow, and the things that we can select on. I never thought that we would be able to select on some of the traits that we can now. Derek, did you?
No, but looking back, you almost like, for example, IVF and selected breeding for sex and uh, flushing cows and artificial insemination. The dairy industry was doing that before it became mainstream for humans.
Hmm.
Um,
Great point. Great point.
I mean, they look at a farmer and they think, oh, they're just taking care of cows and stuff. No, there's a lot of science going on behind the scenes, and that's why we are able to year after year, whether it's crop farming or animal agriculture, year after year, we're able to do more with less, and we don't get enough credit for that. There's a reason you can go to a supermarket and you're granted right now food prices are on the rise, but most years you're spending less of your disposable income on amazing nutritious food that is safe, one of the safest food systems in the world, and we don't get enough credit. All we
Hmm.
ever hear about is how we're destroying the environment and we're a blight on the landscape.
So you mentioned that all of this technology has helped produce more of this very nutrient dense food. Can we have a little bit of a conversation, please, about something I know you tackle, I know that I tackle, and it's that dairy alternatives are not dairy equivalents. I'm not sure how many times I have to
Oh,
say it and how many different ways or how many times you do. But talk to me a little bit about your perspective on that and some of like the actual pushback or misconceptions surrounding that you hear.
absolutely. And this actually goes back to the environmental point too, because they'll compare, say, the protein in milk and the protein in one of the other beverages, and they'll say, for the amount of protein, the alternative beverage is way better for the environment, while ignoring the other 8 essential vitamins and mineral that you find in milk that you don't find in this one, because none of those are actually important when it comes to your environmental footprint of what you're eating. No, it's just the protein. And it's so deceptive, and it just makes you want to pull your hair out. Um, and they do it all the time. They'll compare one nutrient in a product and say that it's better for you without looking at the whole picture.
Hmm.
And that's deceptive on many levels, right? One, we know about the life cycle of dairy.
Hmm.
We know about the water usage. Do we really know do we know like the long-term impact of production of some of these alternatives, right? One, there's that, but secondarily, all proteins are not
Yeah,
created equal. So if there's somehow first of all, you're very hard pressed to find an alternative that even does provide the same amount of protein. And then, moreover, it's not as bioavailable, right? So we can be having that whole conversation. So there's a misconception really at every turn when we're having that discussion. Um, but
We
I
can
think
always blame marketers because they just
yes.
food labels. There's so many dumb things on food labels that confuse people. I
Yep,
don't.
there
what's
are.
what's your least favorite or most annoying? I'll put it to you that
Uh,
way. What really gets you?
hormone free.
Let's talk about it. Tell us why. Let's talk
Well,
about it.
because everything has hormones. So you can't. How can you put that on unless you're? Yeah, even yeah. It's
I
in
think Michele has
everything.
a whole chapter devoted to that.
I've
I
been
know
known to
that's like
write
a
books about
direct
this, Derek.
Michele. Yes, that's a direct Michele Payne quote. So we have this conversation about hormones, obviously.
Hmm.
But I have to know, like, how do you feel about the term plant-based kind of taking over the dairy aisle, taking over the freezer section? And let's talk about those labels and let's talk about taste too.
Oh yeah, plant based. You know, if you want to eat a plant based diet, good for you. I may personally think you're an idiot, but your own personal choices, I don't have a problem with. If you're doing it because you think it's better for the environment or for the animals, well, I I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not better for the animals because plant based does not mean animal cruelty free by any stretch of the imagination. Um, and
Agreed.
it's not better for the environment. A lot of these, let's just go into like fake meat. Well, we won't name any actual brands, but they talk about how it's better for the environment because there's less greenhouse gases emitted. But you're making these using coal powered factories or whatever. So you're releasing a greenhouse gas that goes up in the environment for 1,000 years, not one that cycles every 12 years in the biogenic carbon cycle like cattle do. And
Right.
so it's just a bald faced lie right in front of people when they say that it's better for the environment. You still have to bring all the nutrients, the pea protein and all that into these factories to make the product. So you're shipping stuff. And frankly, if you're going to talk about milk, it is by far one of the most local products you're going to buy at the store. Most milk you find at your store is from a cow that is within, I believe, 150 miles of your location.
Yes, I think that's the latest stat from dairy is that short
Hmm.
distance between the farm and your fridge now,
And
which
one of the
is
freshest too,
amazing.
because
And one of the
usually
freshest.
there before between by the second day, it's bottled and in your store.
Yeah. As a New Yorker, that's a point I hone in on a lot because there's more to us than just New York City. A lot of our residents downstate don't realize we're such a huge dairy state,
And
and
you
it's
are,
like
yeah. You're the
yeah,
number
if you want to
four
support our economy,
dairy state, I believe. You're ranked number four. Beautiful
yeah, we're
farms. Beautiful
Yep.
farms.
beautiful. It is. It's beautiful country. I just want to circle back to, um, you know, the nutrition bit about dairy as compared to some alternatives because I know you do deal with it a lot, and it's not about like people will be like, oh, but I need to have a choice, and it's lovely. Okay, you have a choice, but sometimes thinking, what's the rationale behind these choices? And I think you did a great job shedding light on, are you really picking things for the right
Hmm.
reason because you think they are quote unquote better, or is it just a marketing perception? And I just want to say, from a nutrition perspective as well, especially in that frozen aisle, we have a lot of people going and saying, oh, well, I'm going to pick this ice cream alternative, and meanwhile you were probably nutritionally just better off having ice cream made from milk because you're choosing a coconut alternative, the most saturated fat there is out there,
Hmm.
right? So I think we need to be careful about like why we're making those choices, and that's why your page is so important, because you're showing some of the real why behind what you do.
So do you know what I just got from you? I just got
Tell me.
that nutritionally I should just eat ice cream.
I mean, that's the big
I
takeaway in
Amen.
most
Yeah,
conversations that people have with me. Like, you know what? I'm going to go have a McFlurry now.
yeah.
So, I mean, whatever that looks like
Yeah.
But
for
I
you. Michelle,
I do know
I'll
I
hand it
saved
back
an
to you.
article that said that ice cream for breakfast helps brain function.
I
So
fully believe that, and I don't care if there's
I'm
science
so
or not.
into it. Whatever shred of science is there, it's high in vitamin J for joy. Like, let's
see,
Yeah.
and
just,
that is important. It is
Okay.
very
yes, it
important.
So to
is.
bring us back full circle, because we could talk ice cream all day, or we could fight about Breeze.
Which is made by Jerseys, by the way,
Yeah,
Jersey milk.
Oh,
don't believe the
oh,
whole
here we go
also
again.
boycott.
Here we go again.
Anyhow, Derek, one of the questions that we always try to wrap up the food bullying podcast with is to ask our guest, you in this case, when you go to the grocery store, what do you look for? Do you have particular rules and when you're purchasing food or when you're selecting food off a restaurant menu that you try to follow?
Uh, this is going to kind of sound silly, but I try and shop on the peripheral of the store and stay as and I'm guilty of not doing this because obviously ice cream's in the middle, so got to go in there. But I try and stick to fresher, the meats, the dairies, the fruits and veggies, and try and stay away from all of the pre-made meals that are in freezers and things like that. Um, it's just a lot. I have a lot more control over what I'm eating if I'm not getting a bunch of pre-made meals that are frozen.
Yeah.
Um, and it takes, honestly, it's fun making food with the family. So
Well, good
it's
for
a
you.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
And don't. There is definitely times where we grab a Stouffer's lasagna and we just throw it in there because we are a busy family too. But finding the time to actually cook and use real butter, and because butter makes everything better.
Indeed.
Well,
That's my takeaway. I don't try. I mean, I'm probably a heavier meat base than I used to be because I'm trying to cut out a lot of the cream cheese danishes and things like that. Um, the pastries. God, I love pastries.
how's that working for you, Derek?
It's hard. My oldest daughter works at a place where they have a bakery attached, and she
Ooh.
has a tendency to want to bring donuts and things home.
Oh, that's a
So
problem. Yeah.
yeah, they end up just going in the break room for the guys at the dairy now because out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Pass it along.
Hmm.
Great strategy,
You
actually.
had mentioned too in some of the answers that you sent in beforehand is that you always try to buy conventional instead of organic. And I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that your quote you said because you're a conventional farmer yourself and while utilizing technology to make myself more sustainable. I think that's a really relevant point, and that's one of the reasons why we asked Eric to come back, is because when you look at things like the rotary parlor and all of the practices that go into new dairy barns that allow more recycling of water, that allow for greater efficiency, the practices are certainly more sustainable. So Derek, we really appreciate you being on with us today. I know you said you're about ready to reach 1 million followers, but if people want to find you, how can they do so?
I am on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as TDF Honest Farming. I am at Derrick Josi on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I just started dabbling in a podcast called The View from the Milk Barn. It's it's me touching on things I think the general public might want to know that are going on in agriculture. So today I talked about a wolf attack, and I talked about water in the West and how this is the first year in as long as I can remember where we really don't have any water crises going on, which is shocking.
Yeah.
So
Good. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And it was great seeing your face. We'll see if the video here works or not, but we really appreciate you coming on the Food Bullying Podcast, and make sure you have a listen to his.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Derrick.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for joining us. What other voices do you need to hear in the food bullying discussion?
Leave your ideas and questions in the comments. Come back for more conversation the first and third Monday of every month with the Food Bullying Podcast.